All right. Another great week. We got a couple of great guests this week. Today, we're going to start it off with a phenomenal guest, Coach Reed, 24/7 Sports. There is probably no one on the face in the United States that can answer a lot of the questions better with respect to NIL, college football, recruiting. I mean, he deals with it all. We've seen him all over the place, and he is the head honcho over there at 24/7 Sports. And we go back a long way back to the camp days when he was a head coach, very, very successful head coach, state championships, and really was one of the fast rising head football coaches in the country, actually. So without further ado, let's bring on 24/7 Sports, Coach Reed. Coach Reed, what's going on?
How you doing, my brother? It's great to be here.
Coach, appreciate you taking the time, man, really.
It's fantastic to have you on. For those few people who don't know who you are, give everybody the full background, because I always think the coaching background is such a big part of what you do. Give the full background for everybody, how you got to where you are now today.
I was a high school football coach for 22 years, and I kind of always still look at myself like I'm a high school coach. You know what I mean? I think that it was the foundation for everything that I built. I also coach basketball. I won a state championship coaching basketball as well. And so just working with the kids and dealing with recruiting, from a high level, we had some great teams and some great programs. And it led me into the situation at 24/7 through just building relationships over the years because of the kind of program I had.
Yeah, it's the coaching background that you have. I think that's one of the things that you really bring to 24/7 Sports that is unique. Over the years, they've had a lot of great analysts, but that coaching background, when you start talking about topics, you're not talking about it just from an analyst standpoint who's never coached a game. You've coached a game, really, really successful in coaching a game. Talk about that, how that really helps your perspective, because you worked with the kids for so long in analyzing everything.
Well, what it does is it just kind of gives you a background on how to deal with everything that the guys are going through. You're able to see it from the coaching perspective. You're able to see it. I had sons that played college football. You're able to kind of put yourself in everybody's shoes as you're dealing with those different situations that are going to come up in recruiting.
Yeah, I think that's a huge part of it. Talk about a little bit how recruiting has evolved. I mean, just from the time when you were coaching, to now. We've given a history of this so many times, but I really want to hear the history of how you see recruiting from when you first started as a coach to how it's evolved, and then we could dive into all the other things. But it's changed so much. I'm always amazed. Before you go on, I'm always amazed at how recruiting continues to evolve. Just when you think it can't evolve anymore, it just continues to evolve. Talk about how it's changed over all those years.
Well, the biggest thing that has changed is, remember when we were years ago, it was position. It wasn't position coach recruiting. It was area coaches. So you had a guy who he recruited the area. So I'm from St. Louis. So you'd have the same guys coming in recruiting St. Louis every single year. You would build incredible relationships with those guys. They would know your school. They would know everybody in the community. They would know all the high school coaches. They would know all the trainers. They would know all the kids from a very young age because they were really dialed into your city. Well, that changed to position recruiting. So now, if I had an offensive tackle, I would be dealing with the O-line coach. But if I had a corner, I'd be dealing with the corners coach. If I had a quarterback, I'm dealing with the quarterback guy. So the relationships start to fracture a little bit because you're not dealing with the same guy anymore. You're going to be dealing with a different guy every year, depending on what you have. Also, if you didn't have any players, you probably wouldn't see the coach.
Right.
You probably would be in a situation where those guys were not going to come in kind of at all and deal with you. So that changed. Then obviously we went into the transfer portal in the NIL area. So you used to could bring, if you were a college coach, tremendous value by being a great recruiter, by being a guy that says, you know what, I'm really tight with the guys in St. Louis. I know I can always go to St. Louis and get a player. I'm great in Atlanta. I can always go in Atlanta and get a player. But now, because of NIL, you can have those relationships, but at the end of the day, you can lose a kid over
Right.
$50,000, $100,000. So the relationship part is not as big of a factor anymore. It almost is not a factor at all. We look at a transactional business model now.
Strictly business. It's crazy to think that, right? Like, because the relationships, and it took time, right? Like, but when you're seeing that area coach yearly, you develop that relationship. Like, it starts out as a 5-minute meeting, then it becomes a 10-minute meeting, and then before you know it, now you have those relationships where, hey, you might want to go check out this school because they have a guy. You might want to go check, and that's really faded now with the NIL and transfer portal. It's like a strictly business type of situation.
Absolutely. And I've seen kids in situations where they call me and they say, Coach, I really like this school. I think it's the best fit for me from a systematic standpoint, my relationship with the coaching staff, but their money is just a little off compared to what I'm getting for a school. So imagine this, and Dave, you've been an agent as well.
Yep.
You got a guy that's a great 3-tech. Like he can really play the 3-tech, but he goes to a school that runs a 3-3 stack. They don't have a 3-tech in their defense, but they did give him more money. Well, now he's not a positional fit, so he's lost some of his value. You got a guy that's a great tight end, but he doesn't go to a school that works with a tight end exclusively. He goes to a school that maybe situationally uses a tight end, so he's not a fit for that system, but they wanted and they were willing to pay a little bit more. So when you look at those situations, I think that's what's hurting guys a lot too. When you're not making a decision based on football reasons and you're making them or educational reasons, having your majors, some of those kind of things, a place you're really going to enjoy yourself. When you're making the decision just about the money, you kind of get what you get, and you're going to miss a lot in those situations as well.
The NFL thing is a great point. So when I was an agent, one of the things I learned in those 6 years was how important, because on the agent side, when a guy's getting ready for the draft, paying for training is a big deal. What he's got, some of the perks, what he's getting is a big deal, depending on the level of draft pick he is, whether he, and I had mostly free agent late round guys. I had to find the gems, that were going to be able to make the team. And we had like 7 or 8 guys that lasted for a pretty long, actually outlasted me as an agent. But what was interesting about it was the cutthroatedness of the NFL. And I love dealing with player personnel, and you're seeing this become a bigger thing in college, but I love dealing with player personnel on the NFL side, and even because they would give you yes, no answers a lot of times. And it was one of the things that I told Derek this all the time. People were like, well, wasn't the NFL very difficult to deal with? Well, the NFL had parameters on a lot of things, right? So even though, and that's the big difference between NIL, obviously, and the NFL, because they have collective bargaining, because there was parameters, there were things that guys couldn't do to an extent, right? There were still a lot of things in the pre-part of the draft that were surrounded around money and surrounded around landing the player. But dealing with the NFL player personnel and the GMs, it was really a yes or no, maybe thing right away. Like every time you called up a guy or you reached out to him, you got a yes, no, or I'll take another look, right? And I love that part of it. Now, they had parameters around it because where you get slotted is what you get paid and all that kind of stuff. But what's hard about college relative to that is that you don't know who to go to all the time. And that's the biggest. Now they're starting to put in, I see a lot of schools are kind of trying to adopt some form of that model that the NFL has. But it's hard to do it exactly the same way. That's what I remember dealing with that I thought was great about the NFL. That's why you see like a Jeff Hafley jump to go to the NFL, because he's like, I've been in the NFL. It's super structured in how everything is. This you can do, this you can't do. This is your time off. And I'm not going to deal with this anymore, right? So, and you see this with Chip Kelly going to become an offensive coordinator. So talk a little bit about, because much more than I do, even about the structures that you're seeing within the teams. What's going on with the structures that are forming within college football?
Well, Dave, kind of what you're describing, college football has some similarities to the NFL now because they did start the personnel and the recruiting departments, but it's not going to be the same because the NFL is a process where you select players and college is a process where you have to recruit players. So there's a relationship component to it that doesn't allow college to operate on the same level as the NFL because the player gets to choose his team in college and the NFL gets to choose the player at the professional level. So it's a completely different type of entity and inner working that you're dealing with. But what I will say is it can become extremely, anytime human beings and emotions are involved,
Oh yeah.
things can become extremely difficult because high school, I've been a high school coach, Dave, as of
Yep.
you can get pissed off at a college coach,
Hell
and
yeah.
that can change the outcome of the relationship. The college coach can get pissed off with you, right?
Yeah.
They can get there's guys that will recruit your guys. Well, when they don't get the guy that they want, they may not talk to you for 3 years until you get another guy. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And so you
Yep.
have that
Or you send them a guy that like maybe doesn't pan out, right? And it's like, hey, you told me this, and now all of a sudden I get him on campus and he is this. Like, I'm not going back there for you.
and so because you're absolutely right there, and because you have that human element in that convolutes that muddies the waters a lot, on the recruiting standpoint. I used to tell my guys this. I used to say, I'm gonna tell the coach exactly who and what you are. And if you want me to say something different, then you need to do something different. I had a player,
Yeah.
I had a great player once, and he smoked a lot of weed. He didn't always go to class. And I'm sitting in front of the room with 17 coaches and we watching his film. And I say, well, he doesn't go to class and he smokes a lot. And so what 13 of the coaches say, well, I'm out. Well, 4 of the other coaches say, well, I'm in. I don't care. Well, now you recruit him. So
Right.
he's on campus and guess what? He don't go to class and he smokes weed. Well, you can't call me now.
Right.
Right.
Look, I've given you the resume.
Yeah,
I
this
told
is
you exactly what you were getting. You four said, hey, we're going to still swing and take a shot on him because, from my perspective, a lot of coaches, college coaches, feel like, okay, I know you've coached him in high school, but I can do this with him no matter what he is, right?
yeah.
So there's a little bit of that, hey, I'm like up here, you're down here. But when you give that whole, hey, here's his resume, here's who he is, and you're still going to take a chance, well, now that's on you.
It's a crazy deal because they all think they can do better. I'll give you a perfect example. If you go watch mid-major or low-major college basketball, you're going to see on a lot of those teams some 6'10" dudes sitting on the end of the bench. And the reason he's on the end of the bench is because when he was in high school at 6'10", every college coach that looked at him thought, I'm a better coach than the high school coach. When I get this kid, I'm going to be able to develop him into a player. And you get there and the kid just doesn't have it. And you find out you're not necessarily a better coach than the high school coach. That kid kind of is who he is. And football is no different. Guys that smoke weed a lot in high school, they typically smoke a lot of weed in college, and they typically smoke a
If
lot of
not
weed
more, if
in
not
True.
more.
and so the only thing that changes is now that you giving them 6 figures, a lot of them, they just smoke better weed. You know what I mean?
That's it.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
Great point.
No,
So
100%.
so those things, and I think as a high school coach, the only thing that you owe the college coach is the truth of who the
Right.
kid is. And I would tell my guys all the time, if you want me to say something different, you need to do something different.
I think that's a huge point. And I think about the way that the college coaches look at how high school coaches handle things now. Two things that come to mind. Number one, obviously, head coaches are changing all the time. So which means staffs are changing all the time. So beyond the area coach and the like I was Scott Lakatos, he would be changing the uniform. It was a different uniform, polo that he would have on, but he was my same guy over and over and over again. Rutgers, UConn, Georgia, over and over again. Right? I had Scott Lakatos. I had a relationship with him. He could call me and say, "Coach, you're gonna be 15 minutes late," and I knew, he was gonna be 15 minutes late, and he was gonna be exactly what he said. Right? And the same was when Ryan Day used to be in charge of my area, and Ryan Day he would come to the basketball games of a player that he thought, kid ended up going to Villanova, quarterback of mine. He was looking at him lightly, but he would come to talk about players in the area. That was what he used to come to talk about. And those things changed a lot. And what you're talking about now is that I think is a great point. There's like this lack of trust between college coaches and what high school coaches do. And I don't even know that it's like, I don't think you're a good coach. I don't know you. So I don't know you. And the coaches are always new. And all the young coaches are trying to look like Lincoln Riley, like tight pants, looking sharp. And image is kind of, it's part of it, right? It's a big part of it. Like one
Sean
of the things
McVay's, your Schottenheimers, right? Like the league itself, even the NFL has trended in that direction where we need a guy that, optics wise, like is a good looking dude.
Right. So we always say like one of me and Derek's most frustrating things, and we're both bigger guys too. So we always say this. One of the most frustrating is when Kansas's coach, what was it?
Mangino
got forced out. And I know they said that he was tough on players, all this kind. But I always thought that was an image thing. Like he was a fantastic football coach. And to me, that's what, and every coach does certain things, but he was a fantastic football coach. And when he got first forced out years ago, that was the first time I thought, wow, they're really kind of going towards optics as much as your ability. There's a level of optics to certain things because you're on TV all the time and all that kind of stuff. And I thought that was like, this is way before NIL, but this is where it started to change college football, where everything was about image, including NIL, including transfer portal, including the college coaches. And I think that's changed the relationship with high school coaches who are probably much less concerned with that in general. Talk about, I mean, am I crazy or are you seeing any of that kind of stuff?
You're not far off, but also kind of what's changed is Gino's a dog, right? So
right.
You can't coach like that anymore. In a lot
of hell no.
You
I'll
can
be in jail. If guys like that coached me in high school, I'd be in jail. Like they'd be in jail. Like
think about when you guys played in high school and the way that the coaches coached you. Then think about when you went to college, the way that they coach you. And then even think about your own coaching career and how you coached kids when you started or when you were at the apex of your career. And if you were coaching right now today, how you would handle those situations. I can tell you right now, I wouldn't do what I did 10 years ago as a coach. I wouldn't talk to the kids like that. I wouldn't make them do some of the things we made them do. Now, I do believe it made men out of them. I believe it made a man out of me. But unfortunately, we live in a world now where they're not going to allow you to coach guys like that. And they don't care if they turn out to be a man or not.
Right, and they'll leave. Right, I guess. If even if it was allowed, they're going to bolt if they feel like you're too hard on it. So NIL, and obviously you talk about, you probably talk about this till you're almost nauseous. NIL and transport, because everybody wants to talk about those kind of things. I think what's interesting is those two dynamics coming in at the same time, literally the same exact time. Like in one full swoop, shift the dynamics of college football. Is there a direction that it's all going that you see? Like if you're forecasting what's going on now, is there a direction that you see this going, or is this one of those things that the NCAA is eventually going to have to look at and say, oh, how are we going to rework this? I mean, I'm curious what you think on that.
So the NCAA got caught with their pants down, right? So it's not necessarily nobody knows what direction it's going in, and nobody really knows where it should go. Like typically when you're dealing with situations, you have some kind of idea where you're going. Nobody really knows what's best. Like really what's best. How much money is enough money? How much money do you really need? What's a fair revenue share for the players? We had on my show yesterday, we had Tyler Siskey, who's a legendary high school coach, worked in the front office at, both Alabama and Ole Miss. And he said something interesting to me in Smoke. He said, revenue sharing and profit sharing is not the same thing. when you start talking about how many programs really make money.
Right.
Right? If you really looked at the sheet, who's really turning a profit in the athletic department every year? How many programs get folded because of Title IX? If you have to the women and the men's sports have to be even. So there's still a lot of unknowns, in those variables. But man, I'm interested to see where it goes from here.
Are they talking? So I saw they talking about revenue sharing. They're talking about revenue sharing, not profit sharing, right? As far as with the players, is that what they're talking about right now? Because obviously, if they're revenue sharing, you're right. I read a bunch of stuff that some of these programs could get cut, right? Because if it's a revenue profit sharing is different. Maybe Alabama throws off, X amount of profit every year, and sharing profit would never be in it. But sharing revenue means that they're going to go. So a lot of these programs, like you said, if they're not already in the red, they're going to go into the red tremendously. And the only thing that possibly could happen is, some of the Olympic sports, which is where it usually happens, get cut out even more. So opportunities in, I don't know, softball, baseball, some of those kind of sports. Actually, maybe if you go down to like rowing and I don't know, those things could get cut out, which football primarily and basketball secondarily at most schools fund most of those programs. Is that like a discussion, or because that's a Title IX? Is that a Title IX thing too?
Yeah, I think that's going to be a Title IX thing. You also got to look at this too. When we're watching sports, any level of it, we're watching the top 1%. So the guys at Georgia and Bama and Texas and Ohio State, the people that everybody loves watching, yeah, those kids deserve a piece of the pie and all of that. But man, you got thousands of kids who play at Idaho, who play at Boise State, who play at UNLV, they play at SEMO, they play at Western Illinois. Like, where's the profit there?
Right.
So I'm interested to see for some of these places where the money comes from, because there's only a small percentage of programs that are turning a profit.
Do they have I know the collectives, like obviously a big thing at those bigger schools. Do those kind of schools, like in Idaho, do they have collectives?
They have collectives.
They do. Okay.
Yeah, they have collectives. They just not operating at the same capacity. And I think where players get caught up, man, if you're going to a group of 5 or a FCS school, a lot of those guys are asking for money too. And it's just like everybody has an expectation that they're going to get something, and it's not there for you.
Like, I mean, look, we've heard examples, right? Of, hey, I got the third string guard is coming. It hasn't seen a snap yet. Is coming in and asking, saying, hey, I think I deserve this much money. And it's, how do you handle that? Right now, that trickles down. You're talking about your locker room itself. This guy over here is playing, getting this, but or this guy is not playing and getting this, right? How do you? I can't even fathom how coaches now have to keep their locker room together with all of that stuff on top of it. And it's, I think, why you see, and you could correct me, why you see now staffs expanding to have certain guys in charge of that aspect, certain guys that, hey, now I got to scout not only high school guys but portal guys. You see these staffs expanding, and it's incredible.
Yeah, it's a really tough deal because the head coach can't deal with all of that. And I said this before, that nor is the head coach equipped to. The head coach should not be negotiating contracts. He doesn't negotiate his own contract. So now you got that guy in the room talking money with kids and with families, and they just kind of out of it. You need somebody that specializes in that.
That's good at that. Yeah.
That's what their deal is, to help out the athletic department.
So
right, like I heard recently, like Bill O'Brien talked about, he was a head coach in the league, and then they gave him the GM title, and he didn't like that. Like, that wasn't, he's like, I'm a coach. I shouldn't be in there negotiating this or that. Like, that's not my wheelhouse. That's not my world. And for head coaches to have somebody that is in that world that's better at this, I think only benefits them.
I think that in order to do what Bill O'Brien do, and for him to acknowledge that, that takes an incredible amount of self-awareness. most coaches' egos don't allow them to be that self-aware, and they want to kind of be in control of everything.
Yeah.
Well, NIL starts now at 8, 9 years old. When I get done my tackle football season, I take the kids for ice cream, and we go and get ice cream, but everybody wants to get a milkshake instead of getting the one cone cup. I'm like, wait, we're upgraded. It's NIL already at 9. We're upgraded.
Well,
to,
think about it. You got your
to
baby
the
Gronk to
milkshake
the
that's
world.
$7 instead of the one scoop of ice cream. Oh, it's
Vanilla or chocolate? No, I want this. I want that.
No, they're like, I'll take the cookies and cream. My kid's the worst with all of it. I'll take the cookies and cream. I appreciate. And so, you know what's really interesting too is, so Derek, you brought this point up about the guy negotiating. So coaches, I guess that's goes back to the whole Billy Napier thing. You know, did they or didn't they? But with was it with the $11 million and now he's being sued, or the collective's being sued, everybody's being sued. What is that something that like where GMs are going to be resolving that, or is that a legal department thing? Like that's the thing that I guess must be very difficult for them to figure out. Like who's the negotiator there? Because I can't imagine. I guess it's got to be hard because you got to pay. I'll use a good example. Bart Simmons is the GM of Vanderbilt, right? He used to be Rivals in 24/7 Sports, right? I don't know if he was there still when you came on board, but
I got hired because he left. So
okay, perfect. So you replaced Barton. So that's a good example. Like obviously he knows about personnel and evaluating, but in the NFL, that GM also has negotiating experience. You know, I think of Tannenbaum back in the day, right? Was a cap guru, quote unquote, whether you like him or not as a GM, he was a cap guru, right? The GMs now initially in college are more on the recruiting side, is my guess. What do you see has to come in there in order to get these kind of, because collectives are they I don't know, that must be hard to deal with, that outside collective. Who's negotiating there? Do you bring in someone inside to negotiate, like literally in-house that you're paying to negotiate these kind of things? What do you see that coming and doing?
Well, we all have a skill set, right? So it's just like when a head coach puts his staff together, he has to decide what he's great at and who he needs to put around him to kind of show up some of his weaknesses. So if you're a GM that has a skill set for recruiting personnel, somebody in there needs to have a skill set for negotiating the money. If you're a GM and your skill set is negotiating the money, you better surround yourself with some people who can recruit and who understand personnel. So it's just in when you build that department out, you need to make sure that every single aspect of what you need is covered and accounted for.
It's wild. On the recruiting side, what do you see in player wise? So I know you're covering all these things, but as far as the type of players that are coming through now, like talent wise, is there a change in those players over time? As far as their skill sets, is there trends in recruiting that people like are starting to kind of go towards?
The players are as good as they've ever been before. They're practicing a lot more. They're doing a lot of 7-on-7, and I know some guys don't like that, but they're getting a lot of reps in. The big difference in the players is the way that they're treated when they're really good, and some of them aren't as good as what they think they are. It hurts the seriousness of how serious football is. Like football is a hard game, man. It's a damn hard game, and you got to work really, really hard. You got to be really, really tough. You got to be a guy that's committed to getting hit over and over and over again. And I think that we've lost some of that, in the way. I was at a 7-on-7 event on was it Tuesday night, and I was just really and I talked to some of the kids. I was just really disappointed, in some of the body language, how kids aren't playing. They weren't all playing hard. They weren't all competing. And at some point, I say this all the time, they're going to expect you to be a good football player at some point, especially if they pay you. And I tell this to kids all the time. If somebody pays you, they're going to treat you like they bought you, right? So there's going to be an expectation of performance there.
That's a great point. Because if it's just like if you work for somebody, right? Like they're expecting you. I think that's the hardest thing, and that's what makes it difficult with NIL. That's the hardest thing for a 16-year-old. I mean, I don't envy the parents having to deal with it. I mean, parents may be part of the problem in some cases, obviously.
That's for sure.
And yes, and in other cases, it may be difficult because once you start to be 16 and 17 years old, you're starting to form the way that you think about the world.
Correct.
And you're not a man yet, but you have thoughts like you are.
You feel like one.
You feel like one. You might, and you definitely look like one if you're getting money. You definitely look like one.
Especially when you're being loved up everywhere you go, right? Like you've always been put on this pedestal. Especially, I mean, how many times do we say, hey, remember when you go to college, like you were the dude in high school, and when you go to college, everybody was the dude, right? And now not only are you being counted on to be that dude and separate yourself at that next level, but I just gave you this much more to make you that dude. So now you got, at some point, what is it? The rubber meets the road. You gotta like do your thing. I'm expecting you to play like a 5-star. I'm expecting you to be a dude among dudes. And I think that's really hard for these guys to make that adjustment. There's a lot more weight on your shoulders of things you have to do. You can't just show up now and do what you do. Now you got to work to be on that other level.
It's just a very simple concept. If you pay a guy to cut your grass on Tuesday at 10, you expect him to cut it on Tuesday at 10. He's not volunteering. You paid him to do the job, and you expect him to do it. And once you put the money in play, that becomes the expectation.
Right.
There's no doubt about it. It's interesting too with the skill sets. And because we run a 7-on-7 club in New Jersey, and I'm always amazed at how everybody can run a route, right, Derek? Like they can all run routes.
Every one of them.
Every one of them. I mean, like kids that you're like, this is a Division III level kid. I mean, he runs a route. Like they're all going to like somebody to help them with that thing, whether it's good, bad, or different. They're going to somebody. They could all run a route. Like and now that these mega camps have become like a thing as far as in the summer with the colleges, like we talk about this all the time, Derek. Like when a college coach invites you to a mega camp, part of it is they want as many kids as possible at the camp, right? And they're trying to choose which camps to go to in the summer. And I can't tell you how many times kids choose poorly over and over and over again. And parents are really confused by, okay, this mega camp says it's going to have 100 schools. Like, let's say I went to, use locally, like, I don't know, Rutgers or Penn. I don't, any school. They say they're going to have 100 other schools there, right? So that's the draw for the other kids who go there. And then they show up, and this is the truth, and this to be true. Half those guys are on their phones the whole time. They're only there to see a few kids to begin with that they're looking at, even at the lower levels, right? And then parent invariably walks away, or kid walks away and says, the coach told me to come here, and then I didn't even get, and nobody looked at me. Now, sometimes it's their ability, no doubt about it. Sometimes it was a wrong fit, right? What do you, like, when I'm sure people reach out to you, like, what do you say to people who are trying to figure out, the slam dunk kids? We know who, for the most part, the slam dunks are. There's a lot of guys that still go to Division I or FCS that are not the quote unquote slam dunk guys, right? Or Division II or Division III. What do you kind of tell them as far as when they're choosing where to go camps in the summertime?
I actually love the mega camps. And so I'm gonna go down this road with this. Let's take the guys off the table that are the top players in the nation, because nothing affects them. They're gonna go where they're gonna go. Yep. It doesn't matter if they camp, don't camp. They're the cream of the crop. If there's 100 college coaches here and you're a ball player, man, it's on you.
Yeah.
Like, you got an opportunity. And this one guy who called you and asked you to come, he may be on his cell phone in the back of the end zone, but it's 99 other dudes there, right? That if you make a play, if you show extreme effort, if you show that you can really play, then there's going to be somebody that is going to take interest. I think the problem that the players have is when they say that you're a Division II guy, when you leave the mega camp and you get calls from 12 Division II schools, well, that's what you are, bro. Right? You're a D2 guy. And most of them get in situations where they say, I'm slept on. I'm this. You're not slept on.
Yeah, you're not slept.
Yeah, you just
We've seen everything you've
yeah.
done. It's what you've presented to us, right? Like you can talk a great game, but actions speak louder than words. I tell my guys this all the time. Listen, if you guys got recruited off of what you tweeted or what you put out on social media or the way you talk, like all of you would be at Bama or Notre Dame or one of these big time schools. Because hell, you could talk a great game, but when when the smoke is there and like everybody wants that smoke until the smoke is there. That's what I tell these guys.
Yeah.
And when you need to go out and actually perform and show me, right? Like, are you obsessed with this? Like, is this all that matters, right? Like, are you saying no to that party on Saturday night? Those are the guys that really make that next step because their actions speak for and follow what they're saying. But majority of the guys, they're not like that.
Mm-hmm. And that ends up becoming really the problem, is they can't take where they've been eval at. You've been eval at a certain level. Brother, that's who you are. Go produce. I tell people all the time, look at what Cody Schrader did. He went Division II and he led the nation in rushing and went to Missouri and was first team all SEC. Now he's on the 49ers. Now there's a lot of guys, because I keep pretty good track of it, that have told me they slept on, went to Division II schools, in some cases NAIA schools, and they haven't played at all. They haven't been able to crack the lineup. So now, what are we really talking about? I believe very rarely does a kid get overlooked at the moment. Like at the moment that Cody Schrader went to Truman State, he was a D2 guy at that moment, right?
He can
At
change,
that
like
moment.
he
Now
can
he
put the
changed
work
it. He
in.
got better. And he changed
Yeah.
and improved on his weaknesses. Jared Verse, who started off at Albany and then transferred to Florida State and ended up being a
Stud.
first-round pick. At the time he went to Albany, that's what
He's
he
that
put him
guy.
in. He was that. That's who he was. He gained weight. He got bigger. He got stronger. He took his game more serious. Boom. Well, now he's a first-round pick. I don't believe that many guys get overlooked. Very, very rarely.
And I think it's a great point, right? Because we had
Fantastic point.
remember Dave, we had Scott Van Zyl on, right?
Right.
College coach. Now he's the head coach at Gilman. He made a plain statement and said, look, if you're this, not many guys change going up, or you know what I mean? Like that's kind of the level you're at, right? If you're this type of athlete, yeah, you could put all that work in and do that, but you're not gonna go from an absolute nothing to a 5-star. Like guys don't change that much. I thought it was a great point that he made in terms of that nature. Like, usually a guy that's at this level, that's where you're gonna be, buddy.
Yeah, and it's hard for guys to take that. Most people won't have those conversations with the players they coach in high school because they're scared of the parents. Parents call the principal, they go over your head, they try to
Yeah,
get you
right
fired.
away. No conversation. Boom, to the
It's
top.
or I'm going to transfer schools, and most people don't want to deal with that. But I can tell you this: deal with everybody in truth, and if they leave, let them leave.
Go.
Right? But you're going to have a harder time at the end when you've allowed that kid to think that he's something that he's not. And you know what I used to do with my guys when they played for me, I would show them what the coach said, right?
Right.
So you want to play at Missouri where this is what he like, this is drinks eval of you. You know what I mean?
Right. This is what they think of you. There's no secrets.
There's
And
no
now with
secret.
social media and all that stuff, like the communication and the overall openness of everything, I feel has totally changed.
Absolutely. And so as long as you communicate, with honesty and integrity, I think that you can do things.
I think your point about where you're at, and I never really thought about it that way with the mega camps, like how you come out of there and who contacts you is where you're basically at Doesn't mean that you'll always be that way, but that's where you're at. And I think that's one of the things that recruits have to realize. The only guys that they're looking at like this upside thing with are guys that are really fast or really big, height,
Measurables.
right? Measurables. Everybody else is really where they're at. And where you're at on your performance level is where you're going to go. I think that's a really interesting point on it. And what about them going so outside of their area? Because this is one of the questions that sometimes parents ask me. I'm from New Jersey, and I'm interested in going to school in the South. Okay. And me and Derek talk about this all the time because everybody in New Jersey says New Jersey football is so great, and it's good. It's good. I mean, and Shiano's just doing a great job of starting to get some of those guys, right? But the South is different. Like there's so many players in the South. And when a kid from the Northeast, for example, says he wants to go to school in the South and they go to a bunch of camps in the South and then they come away and they may be a FCS guy, right? Because there's a lot of them in the Northeast and not maybe as many throughout the South, but they go down there looking for something down there. Explain to about how important it is to get recruited first in your area before you kind of venture out. Is that something that's still a thing, or has that changed?
That's the old way of thinking. That's what I would have said that to kids 10 years ago. What
Okay.
I would tell a kid from the Northeast or the West Coast or the Midwest, if you want to play in the South, then go to camp in the South and compete, right? And just see if you're up to par. The advantage that the South has in recruiting is that they have spring ball in high school. So
Right.
because they have spring practice in high school, those coaches are able to evaluate those guys in pads and in camp and in spring ball and see if they can really play. And camp is not as important to those guys as it is to guys in other areas because you saw them participate in the spring. You've been able to watch them practice in pads and see how they respond to getting coached by their high school coaches. That even gives them another advantage because it's not a camp setting. It's them actually running a system that they're very familiar with. So they do have that advantage in the South. But I can tell you, I don't care where you're from. If you go down there and you're a really good player, then they want you. You know what I mean?
You, right?
Right.
I'll take you.
Yeah, they'll take you. So but one of the biggest things is, can you accept the evaluation that
Correct.
you're getting? But
Right.
if you go down there and you make noise, you'll be in great shape.
And I think one of the things too that's hard for
Great point.
kids, student athletes, right? Like is and I don't blame it for whatever. And I'm starting to see it now more with my own kid now that I have one. She's a 10-month-old, but I just see it's hard for a kid to take an evaluation when mommy and daddy have told you you're the best thing like your entire life, right? And now you're hearing something a little different, or a coach is telling you something different. And now to that kid, he goes home and mom and dad are still, hey, well, they don't know what they're talking about. You're still the best. You deserve this. You're going to get this. I think that's difficult. And it's something that has to be brought to the table where, now the coach ultimately has to be quote unquote the bad guy giving these evaluations. How does that kid now take that?
When I was a coach, I had great relationships with my parents. I don't have some of the nightmare stories that guys have on, how upset the parents get.
Yeah,
And
because you hear them and they're brutal.
and some of them do get pissed off, right? But if you're dealing with the facts, I mean, it just is what it is. What I've always tried to do is stay away from what my opinion is, right?
Yes.
And so I've coached guys that I thought should have played Division II football and they ended up in the SEC. And I coached guys that I thought were SEC guys that ended up playing Division II. But I'm not the person who gives out scholarships.
Nope.
And so I put the kids in a situation that they would get evaluated by every single coach in the country. And then the evaluation was what it was. And I always tried to have those conversations as quickly as possible. My parents could call me at any time.
Right.
I didn't make them set up meetings. Like I didn't make them go through a lot of barriers in order to get in touch with me. And I would schedule meetings and calls with them and those coaches so they can hear it from their perspective. I tried to give them more than enough information so they could understand where their kid was at. Sometimes there was just some weaknesses that needed to be fixed in their game. And maybe we can address those through trainers, maybe through a positional switch, through a whatever. Maybe they couldn't be addressed. Maybe you are, kind of what you are. But I just thought that the over communication, like one of the things we did is I made every one of my position coaches call every parent of the kids in their position groups once a month at least. And those lines of communications stopped a lot of issues. It stopped a lot of complaints. It helped solve problems. And that we were kind of in this thing together. I didn't look at the parents as the adversary. I looked at them as the program. They had to take ownership in the program as well. And I know that's not something that a lot of guys believe in, but I didn't look at my parents like a hindrance. I looked at them like a tremendous asset to our program.
Absolutely. And I think that open communication is really what parents want at the end of the day, right? At the end of the day, just, be accessible for me. Don't make me jump through hoops to just have a conversation with you.
Great.
And I think that goes back to who that coach is. Like, this is
And
part
being
of
straight with them.
right. This is part of your job, right? Like, and like you said, coach, I think keeping the opinion out of it. And now it's, hey, look, I care about your kid and I'm going to do everything I can, but this is how he performed. This is the evaluation. This is not, basically what I think about him or any of that stuff, but these are the facts. Like, let me just put it out there. Here's what it is.
Like, I have 3 sons, and my expectation would be that people are willing to communicate with me about what's going on with them and
Right.
what they need to do to improve their situations. I also need to be able to set the bar for where they at and what their expectations should be of them. I think that a lot of coaches, especially high school coaches, waste a lot of time like battling with the parents and
Right.
and going through, they got all these dumbass rules and
Yeah.
Hey,
going
Dave, what
through,
do we always say?
Don't have
Don't
a rule.
set rules.
Don't
Yeah.
have a rule unless you're gonna be willing to deal with that rule. But if the
Yeah.
rules are when you set a
Parameters.
bunch of rules.
Yeah. I just felt like, and think about when when a kid left my program, I wanted the parent to say to every person they came across,
Yes.
this is where you should send your son to play football.
Yep.
Let me give you Coach Reed's number.
They're the best recruiters you got.
There's nobody better.
No doubt about it. I'm curious. So in your new job, from going from being a football coach for all those years to now 24/7 sports over the last several years and evaluating athletes and talking to coaches, give me the best part of your job and what is the hardest part of your job?
The best part is that you get to see and meet people outside of the normal scope of just your high school. You get to deal with kids and coaches and parents all over the country. I love meeting the kids, but I also love talking to the parents and kind of helping them get through, some of the issues that they have or answering some of the questions. I think the worst part about it is when I see a kid do something that I don't like, I'm not his coach, right?
Yeah.
I was at a 7-on-7 game the other day, and if it was my team, I would have stopped the game and made the kids run 5 miles. You know what I mean? Because of the way that they would attack. So I would say the roughest part is I don't have the control to really help correct something that needs to be corrected immediately the way I did when I was coaching. But man, you get to meet a lot of great people and try to help them in any way you can.
Yeah, no, it's amazing.
No doubt about that.
Yeah, what you've been able to done and the way that you first of all, I love and I told this to Derek. I said one of the reasons we wanted to have you on is I cannot believe how great you are at all the interviews you do and all the different shows you do, how you're able to move within. And I always laugh because I follow Coach JB, and when you're on there, I find that you handle it so amazing. And then you go with when you have Siski on, like who's the guy he hosted with, McCluskey or something like that? Yeah, and that's a totally different type of situation. Those are guys that will have a college thought process, like Division I, what was going on there. And I just think it's so amazing how you're able to maneuver between each thing and be able to answer their questions and stay calm at all times. It's a tribute to, I have to say, that's the head football coach in you, because you're always dealing with so many different things that you stay calm through it all. It's been amazing having you on. I enjoy everything you do. I think you've been a tremendous asset to 24/7. I thought it was it was a different hire as far as you're bringing on a high school football coach, and I think it's taken what they're doing to a whole different level, because the perspective that you have, being a coach and analyzing those athletes and dealing with the college coaches is phenomenal.
Well, thank you, my brother. It's good being on. I just try to treat everybody with respect. I don't care if the guys at 24/7 are Paul Feinbaum, or if you a young 19 or 20-year-old and you're just trying to get yourself going. If I come on, I'm always try to do a good job for you and help push your movement forward.
Coach, I really appreciate you taking the time. We know your schedule is busy and whatnot. And I just, like Coach said, I think it's amazing that, you'll hit on all of these types of platforms. Doesn't matter, right? Like, you're going to deliver the same message with the same, juice behind it. So I really appreciate you coming on, Coach.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Have a great day, Coach.
Be good, Coach. We'll talk.
All right. That was fantastic. That
Good
was
stuff.
really, I mean,
Great stuff. Like, and you're
I
hearing
learned
it
so
from
much.
the guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's not just Dave and I talking here, guys. Like, we're not we're not really that full of shit. Like, I know you all think we're full of shit and we just kind of do whatever, but like, there's a guy that's literally in it. And a lot of the things we say on a consistent basis, or have these conversations or talk about, like, this guy is seeing it. And, I think it was great that you brought, the fact that he was a coach, he's been in those shoes, and you hear him talk about how he handled certain things or this or that, and now he's on the other side. It's just like, this world has so many parts to it, guys, and we try and give you everything we can about all of those things. Yes, we have our opinions on certain things, but that doesn't mean that's the way you have to go. We just want you to hear these things from everybody or other
great
people.
Perspective on mega camps too. So I totally had a different viewpoint on it. You know what I mean? And it's
and now you're looking at it from.
I'm looking at it a little bit differently. Yeah.
Right.
So I'm looking at it.
His perspective, I'm sure, has somewhat changed on the.
Right.
And look, the one thing we can all agree on is that, look, if you're that dude, you're that dude. Like, you're in a separate category. You're all, like, don't matter what camp you go to or where it is, whatever. You don't have to go to a camp, right? Like, you're already on that thing. It's those other fringe type of guys that, hey, this guy told me to come to this camp, or, all of those kind of things. Those were the things that he was kind of hitting on and talking about. So now you kind of see a different perspective on the mega camps, and it's justified, right?
Yeah, and it's funny. One of the questions was, and we're talking. So I have to say, we're among probably the worst at handling the comments, because we're so engrossed in what we're doing.
Just and listen, we ain't got somebody in the corner off screen producing this. Like, there is us here, dude. Like, we're
you guys in the room.
Yeah, there ain't nobody saying, yo, hey, you got a question about that. Hell no, we're just rolling with it, dude. Like, so we apologize for that aspect. We do our best. But you know what I mean? Like, hey, this is a two-man show here.
It's interesting. And he's a Missouri guy. And what's interesting is we're going back to today, but we used to have our St. Louis camps. We used to have camps at East St. Louis for a couple of years, because we knew the coach there pretty well. And those were some amazing camps. And then we used to have, I can't remember where we went, which was across. It was still in East St. Louis is actually Illinois, but it's across the river from St. Louis.
Yeah, you're right. It's right there.
Yeah, so East St. Louis is actually
if we do look at some of the coaches, it says, one comment, most coaches think parents are the plague. That's a problem. Yes, I agree. We shouldn't be looking at parents as an enemy. We should be looking at them as an advocate. But I think that's something
we're trying to get them to be an advocate,
right? But I think that's something that needs to be handled, like, early on in the process. If I'm a high school coach, as an 8th grader coming in, you need to develop those relationships and only grow them as it goes, right? I think that's extremely important because, look, at the end of the day, your parents, like we said, are your best recruiters. When they go and tell, little Jimmy's buddy or whoever, or now, here's the next group of incoming players into the program. Parents want to talk to parents. Like, what's the real deal here? Is this coach really about what he says? And when they can sign off on that and say, yes, this guy does a great job. If I had another child, I'd put him through the same program or something of that nature. Like, now you're cooking with gas.
I think that's a big part of it. Being straight with them, making sure they understand expectations.
Honesty.
It's amazing to hear obviously another phenomenal coach talk about how when you set all these rules, it's going to end up being a problem. Like
parameters, brother, parameters.
You
Head
don't
coach
want to have
101. We ain't got rules, dude. We ain't got rules. Be a good human.
Be on time.
I
Be a good human. Be on time. Be a good human.
Be on time. Be a good human. The
don't
rest
miss
of
practice. That's about.
Yeah. You can't be out there going, look, if you miss school, you don't practice. Like, because now you got your starting QB missing school and now he's out for a quarter. Like, here we go. And you sure as hell don't want to be the head coach that's like, oh, well, I know we said this, but this,
That's
one of the other things, Dave.
And I'll tell you this, even the late with, even though I've never had a rule like if you're late for practice, I might make you run, but you're not gonna. There's no rule even there because the truth is,
shit happens.
How many times has a good player had something happen where
shit happens? I got a flat tire on the way to practice.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
You don't know.
Like, yeah. One of the other things was, fellas, do you agree that 7v7 is hurting the game with the fundamentals and behaviors? For me, I think 7-on-7 is a benefit in certain ways, right? Like, now, obviously, the things we all see on, social media, the OT7s, the, throw the ball in the sky and I'm shooting it and all that nonsense bullshit, I think, yes, hurts the game. I 100% agree because, I score a touchdown and I'm doing all this bullshit, jumping into a ball pit. Like, you think fucking Nick Saban's going to be okay with that? Like, that's the stuff that I
showing
think hurts
people
it.
up.
Right. It's more of the off the field stuff of the 7-on-7 culture that I feel hurts certain people. But in reality, I think it's like you just heard Carl talk about it. It's more reps. It's more work. You're going against possibly talent you wouldn't normally see if you didn't do that. And look, at the end of the day, the guys that are the guys, they're not doing that bullshit, right? Like, or they're not, I'm saying like they don't act that way when it comes down to it.
Yeah.
I also think there needs to be a level of better coaching and understanding that, look, all of us can coach and win a 7-on-7, but at the end of the day, like, how about we teach it football wise? Because we all know we can run 7-on-7 plays and score every time. But at the end of the day, you're not going to release your back down the chute every freaking time. And you're not going to run wheel routes and, 50,000 moves off the line, which I'm not getting into because that's a whole nother podcast.
Well, you run wheel routes where you're running back once a game as a home run, not
every other play. Not as that a staple, like, oh, we got to get a first down, run a wheel, here we go. Or, hey, when this guy does this, you go that. It's like, no, like, in a real game, he gets his head taken off, right? So I think there's a lot more positives to the 7-on-7 world. I think we just need to clean up all the other culture bullshit, and I think we'll be okay.
Yeah, I agree. I think and it's part of it. It's the evolution where basketball, right? Like you had their AAU culture was so bad for a long time, and you played in it. And has evolved a lot where it's a lot better than it used to. I'm not saying it's perfect. Okay.
No, it's never gonna be perfect. It's never and it's always going to be a quote unquote work in progress, right? And there's always going to be things that as we progress in this whole whatever world, things are just gonna change. And you either adapt or die. And there's gonna be things that you put in place that maybe they don't work out, but there's gonna be also things that are like, oh, hey, this was really a good move. Let's continue to do that. And I think the one thing overall, and you and I have had this discussion 1,000 times, is that if we want to change the 7-on-7 world, we need an overarching body of control. We need something that's can control all 7-on-7 and do kind of set
or at
the
least
parameters.
That has the parameters,
right?
Now they did try that a few. There was several back when we had the Warrior Kings, what is that? 14.
Holy
There used
shit.
to be
That's almost 10 years ago.
There was an overarching organization that they put together, and what the mistake they made was they charged an exorbitant amount to be a member. So what
Correct.
happened was over time,
And we know these teams.
you know, they
can't
didn't
come up with
realize that
these
these
fees.
organizations, you know, there's a club one year, and the next year there's no club.
I
So
mean, think about it. Every year it's like that. It's like,
New
oh, there's the
club.
new club. Let's see. And then, you know, it's Thursday and it's like, hey, coach, like my kids are still paying. I'll pay you every time someone pays me, I'll get you money for the entry fee. Like,
Right.
you know, they're set up. It's just, and I understand it. It's hard. The changing of the guard and the coaches. Like, there's not many guys like, you know, like yourself or a Marcus Hammond who can say, hey, I've been in this for a hot minute. You know what I
Right.
mean? Or that have run that test of time. Maybe their club name has changed, but they've still developed and continued to adapt to whatever's going on. And, you know, I think it's hard to kind of get that out there, but I think that's what's very much needed in order to do and clean up the 7-on-7 world. If you, so, you know, if you want to put it that way.
And then on the positive side of it, obviously the route running, the covering.
Oh my God! Like we said, every kid can run this stuff.
Yeah,
dude.
those are benefits. The catching the balls, the quarterback being able to get some level of timing and understanding routes of coverage. Those are all real positive things, right? Within it. So, but that'll continue to evolve. And I think, you know, the other thing that, so I learned a lot. I never the mega camp. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, I knew that was going to hit on one for you because we've been pretty, you know,
yeah. Well,
adamant about mega camps or whatever. It gives you a different perspective.
You get mixed reviews on it.
Correct.
And I think you know, is also his approach. I didn't realize, and so I know that you still go outside the area you can go outside the area to get recruited, but one of the things that I didn't know as much about was that, hey, you don't need basically that Rutgers offer at Division I to get recruited anymore. We kind of knew it, but like, because we see it with other guys, but that, all right, I do go to the Northeast first before I go south. I thought that was really sick. If you want to be in the South, just go to all campuses in the South. Yeah, just go.
And like and to me, that seems like,
and then you'll find out if you belong.
But to me, you know, it almost seems like that's like, you know, that's like the logical thing. Like, why wouldn't you do that? But at the end of the day, they don't know that any better. But like, yeah, go down there to a camp, see how you stack up. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you're down there and you're tearing it up, like eyes are already going to be on you. Look, I mean, to me personally, if I see, I mean, think about it. When we run our camps, right, and you're looking at, okay, where are all these kids from? Where are all these kids from? Now, look, we concentrate on this area. But if, like, all of a sudden, you know, like our Winterfest, we have kids coming up from Florida. Like, that already puts you on a radar. Like, oh, damn, this kid's coming from Florida, right? So, same thing. You know, you're a kid from New Jersey. You go down to a coastal Carolina camp. Like, oh, shit, who's this kid from Jersey? Like, another angle to kind of look at or take note of, you know?
Yeah, it's really that's an interesting thing, and we could probably do a whole podcast of picking this brand on, like, okay, how do you choose your camps? Like, how would you choose
the process of going through it? And he can give you probably different perspectives, like, hey, when I was a coach, this is how I would have, you know, whatever. Or now that I'm here, I would do this, right? And that stuff's changed like within the last year too. This stuff is constantly evolving so fast. You got to stay up on it all.
No, that was great. It really gave us the
NIL stuff about, like, hey, you know, head coaches, like, that's not what they do. Like, you know, you need a guy that's your GM or knows how to work with or communicate with the collectives. You need a legal guy to make sure all the paperwork is correct and whatnot. Like, so now you're talking about, like, you know, the budgets of teams actually going up. And, you know, then he touched on the revenue sharing and the profit sharing. Like, this is real deal stuff, dude, that we're talking about that has nothing to do with whether or not you could freaking, like, you know, get to the quarterback or whether or not you can run a freaking, you know, whatever route. That has nothing to do with it.
I think we got to get a Siski on. I started. I used to see their clips initially.
We got to
and
get JB on. We got to see if we can get JB on and see if we can handle it the way Coach.
I don't
Reed
know if we can handle it as well. Actually, I think we might just be laughing the whole
Well,
time.
he might just put me into an entire zone, and now all of a sudden I'll be the East Coast Coach JB, and dude, I'll be fired in 10 minutes. Here we go.
You don't need that in your life,
No, thank you.
Well, no, that would be good.
We're good. Poor Avery's already got a dad that's like, my dad was fired 10 times because he said some crazy stuff on a freaking podcast. It's like, all right, now Coach, you got any place out in St. Louis for us to move? Because I got to get out of the East.
Well, I think my kid thinks that I'm unemployed.
What do you mean? Your wife thinks that? Dude, come on. Yeah, she already thinks that. Wait, this is what you guys are doing? This is what you guys are doing? Yeah, we're on the clock. What are you talking about?
You know what I wish I would have told you about before? And I don't know if you any money you invest at all yet or anything like that, but have you ever heard of this company NVIDIA? It's an AI. This has nothing to do with football, by the way, people. So
that's why we are the podcast that we are.
Yeah. So NVIDIA is an AI. Me and you always talk about it.
You love it.
It's an AI. So how Intel is in your computers, like Intel.
Yes.
Like the chip. So they do AI chips, right? And to put it mildly, the company's been around since basically 1990 something, but it took off in the last 5 years, right?
Of course, yeah.
So I got into it a month ago.
Yeah.
And it split 10-1, right?
There you go.
So, but here's the funny part about it. Now I have to keep it a secret how well it's doing, because
otherwise you'll be in trouble, brother.
Hey,
how do we get that money? You're like, nope, I'm not getting taxed.
Do you have your vacation money yet?
You got dude. You bet that joint account only gets one deposit. The other account, you don't know about this. Come on now.
I'm gonna have to, it's not doing that well anymore.
No, it's terrible. It's tanking. You better figure out something real quick, buddy.
And I didn't even really know about it. I follow this one guy who kind of just talked he's a very, actually, he's really good. He's just a regular guy. He's not like a financial advisor per se or anything. He's just a regular guy who talks about things that he does with his own money, you know, and he's built a lot of wealth on his own. You know what I mean? I don't know if you ever seen these guys on YouTube, but he's a regular guy. You know what I mean? He literally talks.
Davey Day Trader,
He's kind of like Davey. Yeah, he kind of is and he's done well for himself. And, but he's interesting. He's an interesting personality, but so I just kind of was 2 months ago, just started following him because I'm oh, he had some good points about this. And as a regular person, who's not uber wealthy, here's what you could do to
you feel like you can relate to him way better than you can.
Here's how I did it.
Yeah.
I had he basically had a job, and he started building wealth doing this thing and that. It wasn't he was this guy who had all this money and now he's just telling you, oh, I made all this money, but I already had all this money. So it was really, he started talking about this AI, and obviously I always talk to you about AI because I use it in different things. And I'm let me look into it. Is this a real company? I didn't know anything. And as I was looking into it, I was wow, this is interesting. And so I happened to just put a little bit of money into it. I'm oh, wow. I'm
that split helps. Bing. Now all of a sudden you got how many shares? Here we go.
Now, hopefully it doesn't go in the other direction.
Hey, it's all right. You could be a GameStop person.
That GameStop thing, I think that whole thing that happened at GameStop, I think it saved GameStop as a company. I think it was going bankrupt.
How many other gaming stores that do you even know? I mean, shit. What are we talking about?
That was going away because they were in all the malls. Remember, they were in all the malls.
And now there's no more malls. Every mall is becoming a pickleball court. What the hell are we doing?
Dude, pickleball is it's funny. So since I stopped playing.
Dude, we've been done for. I haven't picked up a racket or done anything since Avery.
So and I haven't played in 2 months. My knee, I was down to getting a shot I was getting like a shot every 2 months now for my knee. And so then I was like, I'm just going to stop doing it because the guy's like, I probably still have to get that partial. But Derek, I'm going to tell you 2 things I did. That's shocking. Number 1, I no longer play pickleball. Okay. That helped my knee just right there. Like, 50%.
Yeah.
Second thing is I got these, you ever see those shoes that are like,
Yeah, we talked about this. Like they're like formed to your foot.
no, they let your foot spread out.
Well, it looks like your
It's like the
toes, right? Like it
caveman
gives you
kinda.
like right. And no socks, correct?
Well, well, sometimes I wear socks because otherwise my shoes
Listen,
stink.
how many of this like
I
how many
haven't.
hang on? How many times do you look at videos now of these dudes lifting and they're lifting in bare feet? Like that was like the main rule when like back when I was there was like, and I hate to be this guy, was like, dude, you can't lift in Crocs or you can't lift barefoot. And now it's like a staple of like, nah, like when you squat, I want your foot like, what
Right.
the hell? I'm like,
I
holy
think-
shit. Like
I think
my
it must
strength coach
be-
would have killed me if I was like,
Yes.
Coach, I'm lifting barefoot today. Like, what are we talking about? Crazy.
Right. And those basically those shoes are basically all they are is like,
Dude, they're just a flat surface. Like, I'll never forget
and
when
they
I
have a grip
visited.
underneath, but they have
I'll never forget
no
when I
lift.
visited the University of Florida. Every athlete had their own pair of squatting shoes.
Really?
Every single one of them, because it was, they were flat, hard type, because you want to put your full foot on the ground to get what I'm like, that's an eye opener right there. But now I see it's like, oh, a guy's lifted in socks. It's like, I used to be like, dude, you can't lift. You got to put shoes on. What if you drop a 45-pound plate on your
Right.
foot, dude? Like, now we're in trouble. And it's like, oh, well, and now it's like, okay, I guess this is like what we're doing. Guess this is adapting to the times. Okay.
Do they do that in college at all? I'm curious.
Look, dude,
they might wear open-toed, not open-toed,
or it might
but
be like, hey, squat with no shoes on, then put
flat
shoes on and go, right?
shoes.
Like, but I mean, look, if you show me science backing it, all right, I guess it has. And somebody printed an article that worked, somebody.
I listen last night. So you know how we're at the like walking around. The turf always bothers me. Probably bothers you too.
Right, well, remember everybody was turf for years, and now all of a sudden every NFL guy's like, I hate turf.
Well, so with those where my feet get spread, it doesn't like it still bothers me a little bit, but not like it was bothering me in the spring when we'd be at those tournaments.
Right.
And if 20 minutes of me standing, I was ready.
Miserable.
I was ready to. I was like, I gotta go somewhere and get off my feet.
Right.
But now it's with this, it's like I don't know what it is. Now the negative. Here's the negative.
It's huge because everything obviously works from the ground up, right? So
The only
if you take
negative
care
is
of your
back.
feet, your knees won't feel so bad, and then when your feet don't feel bad, your hips won't feel so bad. Then your back, and it all.
My back did not. So my back. That's the only thing I'm not sure about because, I feel like without cushion, maybe my back needs some level cushion.
Also remember you're working with like you've had back issues
my back,
for
yeah.
Like I hate to be that bearer of bad news, dude, but like your back has been like the thing that probably took you out of the game,
Yeah.
Like otherwise, I sure as hell would be doing this fucking podcast with you.
I'm sure there's not too many old fullbacks that.
If anything, I'd be driving you around as your driver. I could do that. Shit, dude. I was a great Uber guy. Look, there were snacks always in my joint. Like
I bet you were a great Uber guy. Did I ever tell you that I did it for 2 weeks?
Yeah, remember we talked about it?
I was a great Uber guy too. I had all the I
had all the bells and whistles, bro.
The gum, the water,
mini water bottle. You're
snacks.
good.
Oh yeah,
smoke,
right in the sides for you, right. But
you
then
need to stop You want to stop somewhere and grab, something before we get home. Cool. You want to make out with a girl in the back? Whatever. I'm not looking, but I'm looking. Like, hey, it is what it is, dude. Like, I won't tell the person that, like, you just put your ring back on after being out. Like, we're good. It's not Sunday morning at 7 a.m. when you're carrying your dress and heels and walking out and your makeup is all this, but like I gotta drop you at church. Like, all right, we're good. I guess.
Half was on the pillow. Half
like, hey, can you pull around back so that
the half. So this side, no more makeup. This side,
you're good, dude. Like no question. Look, no questions asked and no judgment passed. Like You're all good, dude. Like,
especially down the shore. Especially down the shore in the
listen, we're
summer.
talking about guys making, making teachers type salaries, bartending at certain places for just the summer. Like, that's not a bad gig, dude.
Well,
Craziness.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Listen,
Well,
that was awesome, though, man. That was freaking.
that was fun.
And we're getting a lot of feedback in the comments and stuff. And I'm getting some messages on Twitter about like, hey, like that was absolutely great. Like I found your show because of that. Like I am fully a supporter, like, subscribe, do all that kind of stuff. Check out our YouTube page. Like I said, like, we don't pull no punches here. We just let it fly. We try and give you guys at least, we give you every perspective we can, different perspectives, different opinions.
Different
Ultimately
industries, speed
right, like
industry.
we hit on a lot of different, things, dude. But at the end of the day, we kind of all come back to that overarching compass of like, how do I get to that next level? And this stuff all like factors into it, whether it's a bigger piece or a smaller piece, or it's something that can help you out into it. So, again, we're available too. Obviously, shoot us a message or something, and we'll get done or whatever we can get done.
Yeah, we enjoy doing it, and
It is fun.
The coaches have been great, with it. So
right, and now you're starting to see you'll start to see us we're like the guests that we're getting on now are a little bit different and a little certain type of something. You know what I'm saying? Like a lot of people are now coming at us to say, hey, maybe can I get a spot on here or get a spot on there? Like, it's really awesome to see how this whole thing has evolved. But listen, at the end of the day, like I said, it's just the two of us, man. So, like, if we ain't answering your chats, sorry, there's not somebody in the back over here making like, hey, dude, you got to make sure we hit on this. You don't see us hitting sponsors either here, although it would be nice. Like, so it is what it is. If I got to read something, hey, you're whatever. I don't care. Any sponsor,
right.
We'll be good with it.
Yeah,
We'll make it happen. So,
yeah, no,
I just appreciate everybody watching, dude. Because
it's
listen,
great.
For some people to take time out of the day to hear us two talk about whatever the hell we're talking about, like I appreciate it because I sure as hell wouldn't be listening to me, but it's all good.
As much as should be it's the Prospect Podcast. It should be two guys talking ball.
Yeah, it's really, man. Listen, but that's kind of how it's always been. Like, and in all honesty, like we always go back to what it is. And I just feel like it doesn't matter what episode you watch. Like, you can think it's good, bad, indifferent. At the end of it, you're gonna take something away from it. Whether and then you just do with it what you want. So, I look, I'm all for it. It's awesome.
All right, let's jump out of here and enjoy the rest of the day.